I still remember the sound of that clock, tick, tick, tick. It echoed through the hospital room like a cruel metronome, counting the seconds between the doctor's words and my silence. He told me they couldn't find a heartbeat. My hands went cold. My husband, Daniel, just stood there, expression unreadable as if he was waiting for me to speak first. But I didn't say a word, because I already knew the truth. I hadn't lost the baby. I only pretended I did. 3 weeks before that day, I found the first message. It wasn't dramatic, not like in movies, no lipstick stains, no secret love notes. Just a text that lit up Daniel's phone late one night while he was in the shower. A single line from a contact saved under the name Oliver Work. I can't stop thinking about last night. You smell like her shampoo. I stared at the screen, feeling my throat tighten. My mind tried to explain it away. A joke, a mistake, anything but what it was. But deep down, I felt the familiar sting of something breaking. When he came out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, humming softly, I smiled like nothing had happened. That's what you do when you're trying to protect your peace, or at least the illusion of it. We had been married for 5 years, and I was 7 months pregnant, swollen ankles, constant nausea, and 1,000 hopes for the little girl I was carrying. Our house smelled like lavender oil and old wood. I spent my mornings arranging tiny baby clothes in the nursery, labeling drawers with small handwritten tags. Daniel was a financial consultant, polished, punctual, and proud of how calm he could stay under pressure. He loved talking about logic and reason, about how emotions cloud judgment. I used to admire that about him. But lately, his calm felt like distance. He'd started working late, coming home smelling like someone else's perfume, the kind that doesn't belong in a boardroom. When I asked about it, he'd just smile and say, "You're imagining things, Grace. You're emotional these days. Hormones, you know." That word, hormones, became his shield and my cage. One night while he slept, I opened his laptop. I'd never done that before. But something inside me, maybe the mother in me, needed to know who I was really building this life with. Her name was Sienna. She worked at the same firm, a woman I'd met once at a company dinner. She was beautiful in that effortless way, red lipstick, confident laugh, eyes that seemed to study people like puzzles. Their emails were cautious but intimate. "She'll never know. You said she's due soon. Are you sure you're ready for this? She's sensitive. Don't make her suspicious." The words burned. But the part that truly shattered me was the last message. "If you want a real family, Daniel, you know where to find me. A real family." That night, I sat in the baby's room, holding one of the tiny onesies I'd washed that afternoon. It was white with little pink flowers, the kind of innocent detail you notice only when you still believe in happy endings. I pressed it to my chest and wept until my throat ached. And then something inside me changed. Not broken, hardened. I realized that my baby's safety couldn't depend on a man who didn't want us. And that's when the plan began to take shape. Desperate, unthinkable, but necessary. The next morning, I made him breakfast, eggs, toast, and his favorite black coffee. I smiled. I laughed. I kissed his cheek. And while he was distracted, I pocketed his car keys and copied the address from one of the messages he'd received from Sienna. It wasn't far, a small apartment downtown near the lake. That evening, I drove there through window. I saw them. He was holding her hand, his head bent close to hers. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even nervous. She looked victorious. And Daniel, he looked like a man who'd already moved on from me. I didn't confront them. I didn't scream. I simply turned away, drove home, and started packing a small bag, diapers, few clothes, my passport, and a little cash I'd been saving for emergencies. I was done being blindsided, but as I folded the last shirt, felt a sharp pain in my stomach. Not labor, not a cramp, something deeper, darker, like fear had taken physical form. I called my doctor, who told me to rest. But that pain became my idea. That pain became my cover. I waited 2 days. Then one morning, I went to the hospital and told them I'd had heavy bleeding and pain. I begged them to tell Daniel I'd miscarried, that it was over. When he arrived, he didn't cry. He just rubbed my arm and said, "Maybe it's for the best." And I knew then that I was right. He didn't love our baby. He didn't even love me anymore, but I did love my child. Enough to hide her. Enough to keep her safe from the man who had already abandoned us in his heart. When the doctors left, I whispered to Daniel, "Please don't tell anyone yet. I just need time to process." He nodded, and within hours, he was gone again, back to his work trip. That same night, I arranged for a transfer to a private clinic an hour away, one that treated me under a different name. A week later, my daughter Lily was born healthy, tiny. With her father's eyes and my stubborn chin, I held her in that dimly lit room, and for the first time in months, I felt peace. No one but me and one trusted nurse knew she was alive. I told the staff my husband had abandoned me, that I wanted to keep things quiet. They understood. Or maybe they just pitied me. For 3 months, I lived in a small rented house outside the city, raising Lily in secret. Every cry, every coo, every midnight feeding reminded me that my lie had saved her, at least for now. Until one evening, I got a message from an unknown number. "You think you're clever, Grace?" He told me everything. "Wait until everyone knows what you did." It was from her, Sienna Dot, the woman who had taken my husband. Now wanted to take my reputation too, and she had already started when the message came. I remember sitting in the small kitchen of my rented cottage, rocking Lily in her bassinet. The evening light had turned gold, spilling through the curtains and touching her face. She was so peaceful, tiny fists curled, lips parted in that half-smile babies make when they dream. I stared at the phone for a long time before reading the text again. "You think you're clever, Grace." He told me everything. "Wait until everyone knows what you did." My chest tightened. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Instead, I turned off the phone, placed it on the counter, and walked outside with Lily in my arms. The air smelled of rain and cut grass. For a brief moment, I told myself that she was bluffing, that Sienna was just trying to scare me. But deep down, I knew better. Sienna was never the type to bluff. 2 days later, my sister, Rachel, called. "Grace," she said, her voice uneasy. "Is it true?" My heart dropped. "Is what true?" "That you faked your miscarriage. That you lied about losing the baby." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Who told you that?" "It's going around, Grace. People from church are saying Sienna told everyone you're unstable. That you're pretending to be a victim so you can ruin Daniel's life." Her words came like a slap. My mouth went dry, and for a second, I couldn't breathe. "Rachel," I whispered. "You know me. I don't know what to believe right now." She interrupted softly. "I just think you should come clean before it gets worse." She hung up before I could respond. That night, I sat on the floor beside Lily's crib, holding my knees close to my chest. I could almost hear Sienna's laugh, the one that used to sound harmless, like wind chimes. Now it sounded like victory. How had she found out? Had Daniel told her everything? Did he know about Lily? I went back through old messages, every thread between me and Daniel. There was nothing recent, just silence. He hadn't even checked in since the miscarriage. For all he knew, I had disappeared. And yet, somehow, Sienna knew the truth. I thought about the private clinic, about the nurse who'd helped me. She'd been kind, almost motherly. But kindness can be bought. A sick feeling twisted in my stomach. The next morning, I decided to confront Daniel. I called his office first. The secretary answered. "He's not in," she said flatly. "He's taking some personal time." Personal time. Course. Probably living his best life with Sienna while my name was being dragged through the mud. I hesitated for a moment, then called his mother. I hadn't spoken to her since before the pregnancy complications. She'd always been polite but distant, never quite approving of me. When she answered, her tone was icy. "Grace, I heard you've been having some delusions." "Delusions?" My voice cracked. "What are you talking about?" "Sienna came to see me. She said you've been harassing Daniel, pretending you lost the baby just to manipulate him. I told her I didn't believe it at first. But, Grace, if you've done something wrong, please get help." My throat closed. "She came to see you." "Yes. She said you were unstable, that you even forged some hospital papers. I gripped the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. She's lying, I said quietly. She's trying to destroy me. Then why did Daniel say the same thing? Her voice softened, but it still carried that undertone of judgment, the kind that cuts deeper than anger. I couldn't answer. She sighed. Grace, for everyone's sake, please stay away until you're better. When she hung up, I just sat there in silence, staring at the dead line. That's when it hit me. They were working together. Sienna had twisted the truth so completely that Daniel and his family were protecting her, the woman who'd ruined everything. For the next few days, I barely ate. I barely slept. I started keeping the curtains closed, afraid someone might see me with Lily. I could already imagine the whispers. That's her, the woman who lied about a miscarriage. She's unstable, dangerous. I began to feel like a ghost in my own life. Then, one afternoon, I heard a car pull up outside. Through the blinds, I saw Daniel. He stood there for a moment, looking at the door as if debating whether to knock. Then he did. The sound echoed through the tiny house, 3 sharp knocks that sent my heart into panic. Lily stirred in her crib. I lifted her into my arms before opening the door. He looked different, thinner, eyes tired. But the pity on his face made me hate him. Grace, he said, stepping inside. We need to talk. I stood silent, clutching Lily close. He glanced at her, then back at me. So it's true, he murmured. I felt my breath hitch. You told her, I said quietly. Didn't you? He rubbed the back of his neck. She saw the discharge papers. You shouldn't have lied, Grace. It made you look like… What? My voice shook. Like a mother trying to save her child from a man who abandoned her. He flinched, then sighed. You didn't need to lie. We could have worked something out. I laughed bitterly. Work something out? Daniel, you cheated on me. You replaced me before our daughter was even born. He lowered his eyes. I made mistakes. But this, he gestured toward Lily, this is insane. You need help. The word hit me like a slap. Help. That's what people say when they want to erase your truth. She's spreading lies about me, I said, voice trembling. You're letting her do it. He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out a folded piece of paper, a legal notice. I'm filing for divorce, he said softly, and I'm going for custody. The courts need to know she exists. The room spun. I thought I might faint. You're taking her from me, I whispered. After everything you've done? Grace, I'm sorry, but you can't raise her alone. Not like this. I felt something inside me snap. Not loud, not visible, but deep. The kind of break that doesn't heal cleanly. He turned to leave. But before he stepped out, he looked back at Lily and said quietly, she deserves a normal life. Then he was gone. That night, I sat in the dark holding Lily close, feeling her heart beat against mine. I promised her out loud, no one will take you from me. No one. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, rattling the windows like angry ghosts. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Sienna and Daniel hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. They were about to destroy my life legally if I didn't fight back. I'd lose everything, including the one thing that still made me human. My daughter. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing nonstop. Dozens of notifications, messages, missed calls, and then the photos. Someone had leaked pictures of me leaving the clinic months ago. The captions were brutal. Local woman fakes miscarriage, hides child from ex. Grace Parker's mental breakdown caught on camera. It was everywhere. My social media, the local news blog, even the neighborhood moms group. And the worst part? The photos were taken from behind a car windshield. Someone had been watching me, following me. My hands shook so badly that I almost dropped the phone. I turned it off and held Lily close, rocking her while tears streamed down my face. This wasn't gossip anymore. This was war. I decided to go to the police. I thought maybe, just maybe, They'd see through Sienna's manipulation. I packed Lily's diaper bag, wrapped her in a blanket, and drove to the nearest station. The officer behind the counter looked tired, like someone who'd heard too many impossible stories before noon. "I need to report harassment," I said. "Someone's stalking me, leaking private information." He typed something into his computer. Name: Grace Parker. He paused, then glanced up at me with an expression I recognized immediately. Pity mixed with doubt. "You're the woman from the blog." My stomach dropped. "You've read it." "Everyone's read it," he said. "Look, unless there's a direct threat or proof of who's doing this, there's not much we can do." I took out my phone and showed him the text message from Sienna. "This is your proof," I said. "She's trying to ruin my life." He barely glanced at it. "You should block her, ma'am. Stay off social media." Laughed bitterly. "That's your advice? She's destroying my reputation, and you want me to block her?" He gave me a look that said he'd already stopped listening. "If it escalates, come back." That was it. No report, no protection. Just dismissal. As I left the station, I realized something chilling. No one believed me anymore. To them, I wasn't a mother trying to protect her child. I was a cautionary tale. A crazy ex unraveling in public. That night, after putting Lily to sleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a pen and paper. If no one was going to defend me, I'd defend myself. I wrote down everything: dates, names, screenshots. The night Daniel left, the clinic's receipts, even the nurse's name who helped me during labor. I didn't know if it would matter, but it was all I had. My truth in ink dot. Around midnight, my phone buzzed again. A new message. I hesitated before reading it. "You're making this worse for yourself. Stop pretending you're the victim. The world already knows who you are." There was an attachment, a photo. It was of Lily's crib. Taken through the window, my whole body froze. Someone had been outside. I called 911, hands trembling. When the police arrived 20 minutes later, they found no one. Just footprints in the mud beneath the window. Small, deliberate steps. The younger officer, a woman, looked at me gently. "You need to stay somewhere else tonight," she said. "Do you have family?" I shook my head. "No one nearby." "A friend, maybe?" I thought about Rachel, but she hadn't answered my last 3 calls. "Probably didn't want to be involved." "It's fine," I said, forcing a smile. "I'll manage." She hesitated, then handed me her card. "Call me if anything happens again. I'll make sure it gets logged." Her name was Officer Lane, the first person in weeks who didn't treat me like a lunatic. The next morning, I packed a small bag and drove to the old lake cabin my father used to own. It hadn't been used in years, but it was quiet, isolated, and right now, that felt like safety. For a few days, things were calm. I watched Lily giggle at the sound of rain on the roof, and for a while I let myself believe we could start over. No internet. No noise. Just the two of us until one morning. A car appeared at the end of the gravel road. Black, expensive, windows tinted. I froze. The door opened and Sienna stepped out. Even from a distance, she looked perfect. Immaculate hair, pressed clothes, .com confidence that cut like glass. She walked right up to the cabin porch and smiled. "Grace," she said sweetly, "you didn't think you could hide forever, did you?" I stood in the doorway, Lily on my hip. "What do you want?" "To talk, woman to woman. After everything you've done, you destroyed my name. You turned Daniel against me." She laughed lightly. "No, Grace, you did that. You lied. You hid a baby. I just told the truth." "The truth," I snapped. "You slept with my husband." "Correction," she said, tilting her head. "Your ex-husband. He loves me now, and he wants what's best for Lily." My heart pounded. "You stay away from my daughter." Her smile widened. "That's the thing, Grace. You don't get to decide that anymore." She reached into her bag and handed me a thick envelope. "Court papers. Custody hearing. 2 weeks from now. Daniel's filing for full custody," she said softly. "And with your mental health history all over the internet, you don't stand a chance." I tore the envelope in half and threw it on the ground. "Get out." She leaned closer, her voice low and venomous. "You're not the hero here, Grace. You're the problem. And soon everyone will see it." Then she walked back to her car, heels crunching on gravel, and drove away like she owned the road, like she'd already won that night. I sat by the window long after Lily had fallen asleep. The lake reflected the moon, calm and endless. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was running out of places to hide. They had money, power, the law. All I had was my truth and a fragile baby who didn't ask for any. Of this dot, as I watched the reflection ripple across the water, a quiet resolve began to build inside me. If they wanted a fight, I'd give them one. But not their kind of fight, not lies or gossip. I'd make them face the truth they buried. Because if motherhood had taught me anything, it was this. When a mother's cornered, she doesn't surrender. She survives. The day of the custody hearing felt like standing in the middle of a storm I could no longer see my way through. The courthouse smelled of old wood and disinfectant, a blend that clung to my clothes and made my stomach turn. I wore a simple navy dress, the same one I'd worn to my mother's funeral. It wasn't stylish, but it made me feel grounded. I needed that something solid when the ground beneath me had been nothing but shifting sand for months. Daniel arrived with Sienna. Both of them hand in hand like they were walking into a wedding, not a courtroom. She wore white, always white, as if she were purity itself. He wouldn't even look at me. My lawyer, an older man named Martin Hayes, placed a hand on my shoulder. "Stay calm, Grace. Just tell the truth. That's all we have to do. The truth." If only that had ever been enough. Inside the courtroom, the air was cold and heavy. The judge, a woman in her 50s, had sharp eyes that missed nothing. I prayed she'd see me, not the headlines, not the rumors. Me, Daniel, took the stand first. His voice was steady, rehearsed. He spoke about how unstable I'd been, how I'd isolated him, and how I'd lied about losing the baby. "Your Honor," he said, glancing briefly at Sienna, "I only want what's best for my daughter. Grace needs help. I've tried to be patient, but she's unpredictable." I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. Every word was like watching our life rewritten, line by someone who'd never loved me. Then it was Sienna's turn. Her voice was soft, trembling at just the right moments. She told the court she'd been the one to help Daniel through his grief. That I'd refused counseling, that I'd kept the baby's existence secret out of spite. "We were devastated," she said, her voice catching. "We thought she'd lost the baby. And then to find out she hadn't." It broke Daniel's heart all over again. Tears welled in her eyes, perfectly timed. I almost admired the performance. Almost when it was my turn, I stood and tried to steady my breathing. The courtroom blurred for a second, faces blending into one sea of quiet judgment. "I didn't fake my miscarriage," I began, my voice shaking. "I hid my pregnancy because I was scared. I found out about the affair when I was 6 months along, and I didn't know what to do. I thought I'd protect my child from the chaos, from the lies." The judge leaned forward. "Why pretend to miscarry, Mrs. Parker? I didn't think anyone would believe me," I said softly. Everyone loved Daniel and Sienna. She was already in our lives, acting like she belonged there. I needed time to plan, to get away safely. The opposing lawyer pounced. "So you admit you lied?" Swallowed hard. "I made a mistake. But not to hurt anyone, to protect my daughter." He smiled, satisfied. "To protect her from what, exactly?" "A loving father. A stable home." That word "stable" cut deeper than any insult. I wanted to scream that their home was built on deceit, that Daniel had broken me long before I'd ever lied. But I stayed quiet because that's what mothers do when every word can be twisted into proof of their instability. When the session ended, the judge didn't give a ruling immediately. She said she'd review all materials and consider the best interest of the child. As we left the courtroom, Sienna gave me a small, triumphant smile, the kind that said she already knew how this story ended. Outside, the sky was gray and heavy with rain. Reporters stood near the steps, cameras ready, like vultures circling the aftermath. One called out, "Grace, did you fake your miscarriage? Is it true your ex is seeking full custody?" I froze, unable to move, until Martin gently guided me past them. "Don't answer. They'll twist anything you say." But it was too late. The damage was already done. The next morning, the headlines were everywhere again. Grace Parker faces custody battle over child she hid for months. New testimony suggests mental health issues behind fake miscarriage. Scandal. The truth had become background noise. That night, I sat in my living room, the silence so deep it hurt. Lily slept peacefully in her crib, unaware of the world that wanted to tear us apart. I watched her tiny chest rise and fall. I felt a calm fury settle inside me. If I couldn't win in the court of opinion, I'd win in the court of truth. There was one person who could prove my story: Nurse Eleanor White, the woman who had helped me deliver Lily in that small private clinic. She'd promised confidentiality, but maybe, just maybe, she'd still remember me. I spent hours searching for her contact information. Finally, after scrolling through an old clinic Facebook page, I found a post with her name. Retired now. Living 3 towns away, the next morning I packed Lily into the car and drove. 3 hours of winding roads and nervous silence before I found her small cottage by the sea. When she opened the door, she looked surprised but kind. "Grace," she asked softly, "I wondered when I might hear from you." I broke down right there on her porch. "They're saying I lied. They're taking her away from me. Please tell them the truth." She led me inside, poured me tea, and listened quietly. Then she nodded slowly. "I remember that night. You came in alone. You said you needed privacy for safety reasons. I signed your delivery record myself." She went to a drawer, pulled out a worn folder, and handed it to me. Inside was my signed medical file, proof that Lily had been born under my name, that no miscarriage had ever been recorded. It wasn't just paper. It was my salvation. When I returned home, I scanned everything and sent it to Martin. He called within minutes. "Grace, this changes everything. We can file a motion to reopen testimony, but we'll need to move fast." For the first time in months, I felt hope flicker again. Real, trembling hope. But then that night, someone broke into my house, not to steal, not to vandalize, just to take the folder. The lock on my back door was broken. The drawer where I'd left it empty. The only thing left behind was a note taped to the fridge: "You should have stayed quiet." I stood in the middle of my kitchen, the note trembling in my hand. The refrigerator hummed softly. It's the only sound in a house that suddenly felt foreign, invaded. "You should have stayed quiet." 6 words that made my skin crawl. The police came, took photos, dusted for prints. One of them, a younger officer with kind eyes, asked gently, "Do you have any enemies, ma'am?" I almost laughed. "Just one who sleeps beside my ex-husband." But I didn't say that. I simply nodded and told him I suspected who it might be. They promised to investigate. But I knew how these things worked. They'd file a report, maybe follow up, and then forget. I couldn't afford to wait for justice that moved at the pace of paperwork. I sat down at the table, opened my laptop, and began typing a letter to the judge. If I couldn't protect the truth with evidence, I'd protect it with my voice. "Your Honor, my name is Grace Parker. I am not a perfect woman, but I am an honest mother. The man seeking custody of my child is the same man who broke into my home and stole the one document that could clear my name. If you won't believe me, then please listen to my child's heartbeat in that file. It's proof she's real, and so is my love for her." I printed it, sealed it, and mailed it first thing in the morning. But I knew a letter alone wouldn't be enough. Rumors had painted me as unstable, and the only way to erase that image was to stand in front of it. Unflinching, so I did something I never thought I'd do. I went public. I started small, a quiet Facebook post on a local parenting group. Just my photo, a short caption, and the truth. They said I faked a miscarriage. I didn't. I hid my child to keep her safe. Sometimes a mother's silence is her only shield until the world forces her to speak. I went to bed expecting silence. By morning, there were hundreds of comments. Then thousands. Women shared their own stories of abuse, of gaslighting, of being called crazy when they were only afraid. Some didn't believe me, but most did. The tide began to turn. A local journalist reached out asking to meet. Her name was Mara, and she said something that stuck with me. People will forget rumors, Grace, but they'll remember a mother who fought back. We met at a cafe. She recorded everything. My story, my evidence, the police report, even the missing folder. When her article went live 2 days later, it exploded. Woman accused of faking miscarriage says extol evidence. Police investigating. The same outlets that once mocked me now wanted interviews. But I turned them all down except for one radio show, where I spoke directly to whoever had written that note. You told me to stay quiet, I said, my voice steady. But I won't. You can take my documents, you can twist my story, but you will never take my child's truth. Not anymore. That broadcast reached more people than I could have imagined. Within days, Nurse Eleanor's clinic contacted my lawyer. They had kept digital backups of every birth record. The file had been tampered with after I left, but the timestamp showed something critical. Sienna's name had been accessed using Daniel's credentials. It was the proof we needed, not just that Lily was mine, but that they'd tried to erase her. When Martin called with the news, I broke down. All the strength I'd been holding on to shattered at once. It wasn't just relief. It was mourning for everything I'd lost along the way. Trust, peace, the woman I used to be. The court date for the final hearing arrived like a reckoning. This time, I didn't wear navy. I wore white. When Daniel saw me, his face tightened. Maybe out of guilt, maybe pride. I didn't care which. Sienna wasn't beside him. Rumor was she'd been questioned by police about the break-in. The judge looked stern when we began. Martin presented the digital records first, then the police report, and finally a printed transcript of my broadcast. When the judge turned to Daniel, her voice was icy. Mr. Parker, would you like to explain why your credentials were used to access and alter medical records from your wife's delivery? Daniel stammered, tried to deny it, but the evidence was irrefutable. Every lie he'd built began to crumble in that courtroom. For the first time, I didn't feel like the accused. I felt like a mother standing on the edge of justice, not begging for it, but demanding it. The ruling came 2 weeks later. I sat alone in my living room when Martin called. Grace, he said quietly, the judge granted you full custody. And she's ordered a formal investigation into Daniel and Sienna for evidence tampering. I couldn't speak. Tears came silently, slipping down my cheeks as Lily babbled on the carpet beside me, clutching her favorite stuffed bunny. I picked her up and held her close, whispering, "It's over, baby. We're safe now." But in my heart, I knew it wasn't truly over. Because peace after betrayal doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in slow waves. Like forgiveness, learning how to breathe again. Weeks later, I received a letter from Sienna. Just a single page. You win. I never wanted to hurt the baby. I just wanted him to love me. I see now he never really did. I hope one day you can forgive me. I folded the letter and tucked it in a drawer. Not as a reminder of pain, but of what lies can cost. Because in the end, the truth didn't just set me free. It taught me something deeper. That sometimes silence isn't protection. It's permission for others to rewrite your story. There's a kind of quiet that only comes after surviving a storm. Not silence. Exactly, more like the stillness of a house that's finally exhaled. The months that followed the court ruling were the softest kind of chaos. I moved into a smaller place, nothing fancy, just a modest home near the coast with creaky floors and a backyard full of overgrown lavender. Lily would wake up to the sound of seagulls instead of arguments. That was enough for me. At first, I didn't know how to live without the constant weight of defending myself. I'd wake up expecting another call from a reporter, another message from Daniel, another whisper in the supermarket aisles. But the noise had faded. All that remained was life. Messy, tender, real life. I started therapy. The first session, I barely spoke. I just sat there, tracing the rim of a chipped coffee cup and listening to the ticking clock on the wall. When the therapist asked what I wanted most, I said the first thing that came to mind: to stop being angry. She nodded slowly, like she understood. Anger's a heavy coat, she said. You needed it once, but now it's time to see who you are underneath it. That stayed with me, because for so long I'd worn that anger like armor, convincing myself it was strength. But strength, I learned, can also look like softness. One morning, about 3 months after everything, I got an email from an unfamiliar address. It was from Daniel. I've started therapy too, he wrote. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know. I'm trying to be better for her. I stared at the screen for a long time. The old me would have deleted it, but instead I replied with 2 words: that's good. And somehow I meant it, because forgiveness, I realized, isn't a gift for the one who hurt you. It's the key that unlocks your own peace. Lily grew fast, too fast. One evening, as I tucked her in, she asked, "Mommy, where's Daddy?" I hesitated. The way all mothers do when trying to protect a child from truths they're too young to carry. He lives somewhere else now, sweetheart. But he loves you. She nodded sleepily, clutching her bunny close. That's okay. I have you. And just like that, all the brokenness in my heart found a reason to keep healing. A year later, I started volunteering at a local women's shelter. I didn't tell my story often, only when someone needed to hear it. A young woman named Maya once asked, "How did you get through it? When everyone thought you were lying?" I told her the truth. You don't wait for people to believe you. You just keep walking one truth at a time until your story stands taller than their rumors. Sometimes I saw myself in those women, the fear in their eyes, the exhaustion in their smiles. And sometimes they reminded me how far I'd come. One spring afternoon, while cleaning, I found the letter from Sienna again. The paper had yellowed slightly, the ink smudged where tears once fell. I thought about her, about the version of her that believed stealing another woman's life would fill the emptiness in her own. I didn't hate her anymore. Pity, yes. Sadness, too. But not hate, because I'd learned something she hadn't. Love taken by deceit never stays. A few weeks later, I received a letter from the courthouse. It wasn't about the custody case. It was a notice that the investigation against Daniel had been officially closed. No charges. No punishment. I sat on my porch for a long time with that letter in my hands. And then I smiled. Because for the first time, I didn't need punishment to feel peace. Justice had already happened, not in courtrooms or headlines, but in the quiet life Lily and I built after everything fell apart. Now, every night before bed, I tell her stories. Not fairy tales, real stories. Stories about courage, about mistakes, about how sometimes doing the right thing looks like standing alone. One night she asked, "Mommy, were you ever scared?" I laughed softly. Every day. I said, "But I was brave anyway." She thought about that, her tiny face serious. Then I'll be brave too. And in that moment, I realized that's what it all meant. All the pain, all the fighting, all the lonely nights, they weren't for nothing. They were for this, to teach my daughter that truth can bend but never break. It's been 2 years now. Sometimes when the sea breeze carries the faint scent of lavender through my window, I think back to that day in the kitchen, the note, the fear, the woman I used to be. She was fragile, terrified, uncertain, but she was also fierce. And she kept standing even when her world tried to bury her. I don't hide anymore. Not from my past. Not from my story. Because surviving isn't shameful. It's sacred. You know, child, life has a way of teaching us the same lesson over and over until we finally learn it. Gentle, we think storms come to destroy us. But sometimes they come to reveal us. To show us what was real all along. And what was only pretending. Evelyn thought her world ended the day she found that birth certificate, but that was just the day her old world burned away so her true one could begin now. I've seen folks like Daniel before. Charm that can fill a room, but a soul that never stays in one place long enough to grow roots. And I've seen women like Sienna so desperate to be loved, they'll drink poison if it's poured into a crystal glass. But Evelyn, she learned something mighty powerful. When the truth is on your side, you don't have to shout. You just have to stand. Because lies, they burn out like fireworks. But truth glows steady. Like a candle that never runs out of wax. You see, forgiveness ain't forgetting. It's saying you no longer get to live rent-free in my heart. And peace. Peace don't come when they apologize. It comes when you stop waiting for it. Evelyn found that peace in the sound of her daughter's laughter, in the smell of lavender on a warm morning, in the quiet moments when no one was watching and she realized she didn't need to be believed to be whole. So, if you're listening tonight and you've ever been called a liar for telling your truth, I want you to remember this. Your truth don't lose its power just because somebody else is too scared to face it. Say it once. Say it honest. Live in a way that makes the truth louder than any words ever could. Because healing isn't about erasing what happened. It's about learning to live beautifully after. And one last thing, baby. Don't ever mistake quiet for weakness. Sometimes the strongest thing a woman can do is simply refuse to crumble. Evelyn didn't rebuild her life overnight. She took her time. She cried. She stumbled. She learned to smile again. And somewhere between the heartbreak and the healing, she found herself. So tonight, as you close this story, I want you to ask yourself, what truth have I been too afraid to stand in? Maybe it's time to stop running from it. Maybe it's time to let it set you free. Because sometimes love lies. But truth never leaves. The truth don't need to shout. That's the moral of tonight's story. Sugar. Now go on, hold your head high. Your peace is waiting on the other side of your truth.